True crime cases don't get much more bizarre than the one we'll be exploring today. It's a case so strange, with so many unexpected twists and turns, it left police scrambling for answers. We'll be diving deep into the perplexing murder investigation of David Camm and the grisly deaths of his wife and young children. This case is filled with allegations, DNA evidence that made no sense, and no shortage of potential suspects. As we unravel the endless peculiarities surrounding this tragedy, you'll be left wondering what really happened, and how could such horror have befallen this ordinary family? Keep watching to find out, and before that, hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on the chilling details in future videos. On the quiet evening of September 28, 2000 in New Albany, Indiana, David Camm's life still made sense. He had spent a normal day working at the family supply business after leaving his state trooper job a few months back. He anticipated picking up kids Brad and Jill from swimming practice later before reuniting with his wife Kim when she got off work. After dinner, David headed off to play his usual weekly basketball game at a nearby church while Kim went to pick up 7-year-old Brad and 5-year-old Jill. The kids would surely be hungry and tired after their activities, David thought, as he embraced all three and headed out the door the last time he'd see their smiling faces during a time of pure normalcy. The sweaty but satisfied former college basketball player left the court around 9:20 p.m. after playing full-court games for over 2 hours. Arriving home 15 minutes later, still wearing his gray t-shirt and gym shorts, he pushed the button to raise the garage door, expecting to see Kim's shiny new Bronco inside. But an unimaginable sight stunned David instead as the door slowly creaked open. His whole beloved family lay sprawled out on the cold concrete floor, bloodied and lifeless. Kim was face down in a pool of thick red blood. Brad and Jill looked as if they had been hurriedly draped across the back seat of the vehicle parked beside their mother's body. The investigation into the gruesome Camm family murders quickly took a bizarre turn, as suspicion settled on David Camm himself within days, despite a complete lack of physical evidence tying him to the crimes. Incredibly, David was charged just 3 days after making the initial 911 call, reporting the deaths of his wife Kim, young son Brad, and daughter Jill inside their home garage on the tragic evening of September 28, 2000. The foundation of the prosecution's peculiar theory centered around 8 tiny bloodstains found on the t-shirt David was wearing when he discovered the grisly scene after returning home from playing basketball. The state's blood spatter analyst argued the minute specks came from his wife during the shootings, constituting critical implicating evidence. The assertion came not from a seasoned expert, however, but rather Robert Stites, a former crime scene photographer with no specialized blood pattern training, enlisted to stand in that night. Stites' bold claim splashed David's t-shirt across headlines statewide, but numerous distinguished analysts later concurred much more benign causes, including transfer from David's frantic attempts to resuscitate his son. The blood dots nevertheless delivered the prosecution a powerful narrative, and David's t-shirt emerged as the symbolic canvas on which his guilt would be cast before rapt courtroom audiences for over a decade to come. The state further sought to establish David's supposed motive by introducing testimony regarding multiple affairs he had during his strained marriage. David even awkwardly admitted his infidelity from the witness stand. But while certainly raising character concerns, the dalliances did little to substantiate the prosecution's flimsy support for murder. Yet damning accusations win over jurors. In the end, the prosecutors achieved their goal in dramatically framing the case against David. And despite his testimony alongside 11 witnesses accounting for his whereabouts away from the crime scene during the murders, after 25 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted David on all 3 murder charges in March 2002. He was sentenced to an astronomical 195 years behind bars, with the image of blood-stained betrayal splashed across his t-shirt underpinning a conviction secured through argument over evidence. But the case was far from over, and as David languished in prison over the next decade mourning his wife and young children, the investigations of early oversights and mishandlings emerged to trigger a series of appeals, plunging an innocent man into a bizarre legal quagmire uniquely devastating in consequence. Crucial inaccuracies in the timeline and forensics would surface during David's legal fight for freedom, dismantling key pillars of the prosecution's original perceived ironclad case. Phone records from David's home on their fateful last night were proven misinterpreted in actuality, placing the disputed 911 call an hour earlier, when 16 witnesses saw him playing basketball across town, rather than during the murders as initially implied. Autopsy reports further muddled the timeline, determining Kim, Brad, and Jill likely died close to 8 p.m., while David's well-documented alibi placed him miles away shortly after 9 when he placed the 911 call. Blood spatter interpretations purportedly linking David to the violence have also since been roundly rejected by distinguished experts who concur the stains likely transferred innocently as he checked son Brad for any faint hope of survival. Yet despite these revelations dismantling the backbone of the state's circumstantial arguments against David, the uncanny stigma clung to perceptions of his character throughout relentless appeals. Seeking to justify David's conviction, despite the corrupted foundation it sat upon, the increasingly desperate prosecution pivoted to floating the truly bizarre theory that David conspired with another man, a stranger, mysteriously tied to the crime scene, to murder his family in a murderous love triangle-inspired plot. That man was Charles Boney, a violent criminal who had been released from prison just months prior and had no known connection with David or the Camms. Boney's DNA astonishingly matched a sweatshirt left at the garage following the murders. And significantly, his palm print sat glowing on the family's car door handle, directly placing him at the scene. When questioned by detectives, Boney somehow concocted varying accounts downplaying his obvious role. At one point, he even claimed David attempted to first murder him over an affair he imagined David was having with his wife Kim, using the very gun later used on the Camm family. A complete confabulation without basis in reality. Police searched fruitlessly for any confirmation David ever interacted with Boney in his life, much less conspired with the career criminal to murder his beloved young children and wife over money. Prosecutors realized no credible motive could ever be established. Yet in their fixation to uphold David's conviction, despite the crumbling pillars beneath it, they recklessly fed Boney's shifting stories enough credence to keep open the ludicrous love triangle pretense. And consequently, they outrageously left Boney negotiating for his own freedom at David's expense, allowing the legitimately guilty man to bargain lies for liberty, while an innocent father unjustly faced condemnation. At a second trial in 2006, David once again found himself pleading against the state's shape-shifting narratives constructed to uphold his guilt above truth. This time, the prosecution sunk to deeply disturbing lows by permitting the unfounded yet permanently damaging accusations that David also molested 5-year-old daughter Jill prior to her murder to poison jury perception against him. The shocking claims trace back to a single colposcopic exam photo revealing acute, localized trauma misinterpreted as molestation by the medical examiner. But the context of the severe neighboring gunshot wound clarified the causation as an innocent artifact rather than violent sexual assault. Nevertheless, the mere introduction of such a profoundly inflammatory notion without an established basis proved sufficient to turn the jury decisively against David, despite glaring issues with the overall prosecution. And devastatingly, after decades of imprisonment clinging to his innocence, this time the conviction carried a crushing sentence of life without parole. Finally, in 2013, the state's deeply flawed case collapsed for good when appeals courts conclusively overturned David's unjust conviction. The ruling also necessitated the belated full conviction of Charles Boney as the true killer, though tellingly prosecutors pushed for a last-ditch retrial of David nonetheless. By this point, the gross investigative failures and David's established innocence rendered the effort an embarrassing last gasp that finally cleared his name after 13 years caged mourning 3 murdered loved ones. David Camm's agonizing story starkly illuminates flaws permeating the justice system. When law enforcement locked onto convoluted theories absent supporting evidence, 3 lives callously ended. Then authoritarian machinery crushed an innocent man for 13 years in a misguided quest to save face. Public servants must remember whom they serve. For both victims seeking closure and the accused hoping for fair treatment depend on their commitment to even-handed wisdom guiding the way over ego. There exists no winners here. Still, if David's pain gives birth to reform, then hope persists. The justice system must earn back public trust through measured actions, not declarations, vowing to filter bias and follow truth at all human costs. If you found this case intriguing, please like this video and subscribe for more true crime content.